Hi, everybody, and welcome to Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. After an odd summertime Texas stop in Austin, Phish is keeping us disoriented this year. It's now time for a holiday weekend run in Colorado, but not the one we expect. Instead of the end of summer blowout at Dick's over Labor Day weekend this summer, we are instead celebrating our country's independence with a July 4th weekend party at a college football stadium almost double the size of Dick's. That would be July 3rd, 4th, and 5th at Folsom Field in Boulder. Today's guest, Bryan from Boulder, has lived in the college town for over 20 years, and he has a lot to offer attendance bias listeners today. While thousands of Phish fans have made Dick's their summer family reunion, this year is a change of scenery, not to mention an adjustment to the calendar. When these shows were rumored, and then when they were announced, there were some mixed feelings among the fan base, at least those who made their opinions known online. Bryan explains why there's so much to look forward to in Boulder and how, in many ways, Folsom Field has a lot to offer when compared to Dick's. But this episode is not all just a comparison of two Colorado stadiums. There's also the band's history in Boulder, the activities within the city and around the city, restaurant and brewery recommendations, and more. I think a lot of us are curious about what this run is going to look like, and today's episode might be able to give us some answers to frequently asked Folsom questions. So let's join Bryan from Boulder, longtime resident, to give us the lowdown on what to expect for July 4th weekend at Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado. Bryan, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Brian. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am super excited to talk about today's venue and the upcoming shows, which is Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado, July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, July 4th weekend, brand new venue in a hot part of their fan base, not just temperature-wise in July, but also, density, a lot of people. It's going to be a destination weekend. And there's a lot to this because when it was announced, before it was announced, there was some controversy, mixed opinions. So I'm really excited to get at least one voice in here from someone who lives in Boulder to get the lowdown. I'm coming to this run and I don't know anything about Folsom Field. So we're all counting on you, Bryan.
Well, I'm happy to be of service.
So let's get right to it. Bryan, what is your history in Boulder?
I've been in the Boulder area since 1991. Having transferred from another college to the University of Colorado Boulder that fall. In school here, I met my wife, who is a rare Boulder native. And when we married, we lived in the surrounding communities of Boulder. So the bedroom communities, if you will, of Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville for a number of years. We found ourselves always desiring to come back into the city. We were often coming in for dinners and a lot of friends that were here. So 20 years ago, we decided, let's do it. And we moved into the city proper. And we currently live about a half a mile within walking distance of downtown. We raised our two boys who are now in their mid-20s here in the city. They both went to Boulder High School. Some of us are definitely natives, and I'm probably as close as I can be to a native Boulderite at this point.
You've married into the Boulder native family tree.
That's right. Exactly. Yes.
What did you mean when you said that your wife is a rare Boulder native? Is it a transient city or just because it's a college town?
I think both those. I think, certainly being a college town, there's a lot of folks that are obviously not from here. The college has a lot of people. I think well over 50% of the college is from out of state. That said, at the same time, it's always been a really small town, right? I mean, it's without the kids here, it's 60,000, 70,000 people. When my wife grew up here, it was 20, 30,000 people. It's just not that big a town, right? And I think that's really where I'm coming from.
I've only been to Boulder once. Back in 2009, I was lucky enough with my then wife, or then girlfriend and then wife, and now ex-wife, to get tickets for Phish at Red Rocks right at the changeover from late July into early August in 2009. And we had more than 4 days. We turned it into a vacation because neither of us had been to Denver either. So we spent it as like a week or 8 days just on vacation in the middle of the summer. And we spent a day in Boulder. And what I remember from it, because it's a number of years ago now, it seems like one long, busy strip that seems very quaint at the same time, with a lot of, I wouldn't call them housing developments, but maybe more typical suburbs surrounding that main area. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, so the area that you're referring to most likely is Pearl Street, which is downtown. It's a walking mall where there's a number of restaurants and bars and businesses. There are townhomes down there, and then kind of you spread out in all of the directions, certainly not to the west, because that's where the mountains are. But as you spread out to the north and to the south are homes and neighborhoods. To the east is more commercial. And then when you get outside of the city limits, you cross over through the open space to, surrounding communities outside of there. But yeah, you're remembering it well. And actually, you noted those 2009 shows at Red Rocks. I recall distinctly, I don't know if it was the second night or the third night of that run. I know the first night was freezing cold. And it was in August, right? I want to say
The first night, it was July 30th through August 2nd, 4 nights, and it was rainy and cold for at least the first three.
yes, and there was that second set opening round, right? That
Yep.
was a deluge, an absolute deluge. Yes,
Right. And the whole run ended with Bill Kreutzmann coming on the second drum set. It
that's
was
right.
full of memories, and just being at the venue was an experience in itself.
Phenomenal venue. We're very blessed to have it within a half an hour driving distance.
So at the time of this recording, this run in Boulder at Folsom Field, July 3rd through 5th, these are the only shows other than Forest Hills that I have tickets for right now that I'm scheduled to go to. SPAC is a maybe. The Man is a maybe. By the time this airs, I might be going to half the tour. Who knows? I've been to Boulder, but like I told you, it was just for a day. So, what is something that you love about Boulder? You've been there, you said, around 20-ish years. What is something that you love about it that maybe you can't find anywhere else? People rolling into town from out of town for July 4th weekend, what should we look for?
I love this question because I love to talk about my city. Excuse me for sounding like an ad from the Chamber of Commerce, but give me a minute. Several interesting things. So including the student population, Boulder is a college town, right, of about 100,000 residents. And it sits at the foot of the Rocky Mountains and these iconic sandstone formations called the Flatirons that reside in a park called Chautauqua. The city is 100% surrounded by 46,000 acres of open space land, which by law cannot be developed on. And that's one of the reasons why Boulder is called the Boulder Bubble. So inside of all of this open space, we have 155 miles of trails and 300 miles of dedicated bikeways that go like throughout the mountains and throughout the mountain open space, as well as the city. And what also is cool is on these trails that I speak of, many of them, if not the majority of them, allow dogs and off-leash dogs if the dogs have the proper permits. So it's really common for anybody to be on a hiking trail and just to have a dog walk up to you out of nowhere and to meet you and say hello. And it's a wonderful experience.
I'm sold. I'm sold. I love it. I want to move already.
So, along with obviously all this open space comes hiking, biking, rock climbing, all kinds of other outdoor activities. Culturally, we have a really thriving art scene. People have probably heard of the Boulder Theater, the Fox Theater. We have the Dairy Center for the Performing Arts, Chautauqua Auditorium, where last year I saw Hornsby play, right? It's a really small, quaint barn, an amazing place to see music. And all of these places that I mentioned, what was just announced last week was that starting in 2027, Boulder is going to be the home to the Sundance Film Festival, which is moving from Park City.
Right, from Utah.
That's right. Exactly. So the real answer to your question, Brian, what do I love about Boulder that I can't find anywhere else, is that Boulder is home to the First United Church of Dix, which was established in 2011 by the Reverend Valdez Nuts. And what is the First United Church of Dix, you probably ask? Well, it's a group of people brought together from across the planet that work together to take down Wilson, wherever and whenever we find it, such that one day we'll lead our people back to Gamehenge.
How do I join?
Well, if your listeners wish to embrace the path of eternal flow and never-ending splendor, I encourage them to not only consult the Helping Friendly book, but also to reach out to the First United Church of Dicks via fuckdicks.com. That's www.fucdics.com.
Is this some sort of Mormon church that you and your friends who go see Phish have split up, and you used seer stones to find hidden messages buried from Adam and Eve's time?
There have been elements of that kind of tradition in Buck Dicks, but truth be told, it's really just a group of friends, all of whom have seen many shows together over the years. In the past, we've hit local shows. Some of us are going to hit spring tour together, and it's a group of folks from Boulder. We've got friends from Chicago, friends from the East Coast, friends from Seattle. We all just get together and see shows together. And we decided, hey, let's formalize this, and the more the merrier. So we made a website, and we're recruiting day by day.
Well, that actually bumps up against something I wanted to ask you about, you personally, your opinion on something, not just about Boulder itself, but about the timing of this show and the fact that these three shows exist at all, because the centerpiece of the summer tour for the last, 14 years or so, has been Dicks at the end of the summer, right? It's been a family reunion, right? We could say, with a lot of friends who gather around from corners of the country. People love Dicks. Love Dicks. Phish announced in February that they're going to play a, quote, holiday weekend in Colorado, right? This 3-night show in Boulder is kind of a substitute holiday weekend in Colorado instead of Dicks, which is always held nearby in Denver on Labor Day weekend. This wasn't a surprise to fans who pay attention to the Phish rumor mill, as rumors about a canceled Dicks run began, at least in my memory, as early as December. Like before I had Christmas break, I remember people texting me, hey, you want to come to Colorado this summer? Like, Phish is playing Folsom, you'll see. Because I can never make it to Dicks, because as a teacher, school always starts the day after Labor Day. So for me, it would be too much of a turnaround, too wacky for me to go to like a 4-night run or a 3-night run, depending on the year, and then fly 2/3 of the way back across the country for within one travel day, and then have to, holy shit, be in front of 12-year-olds at 7:15 in the morning. Could never do it. So my friends started texting me, are you going to be at Folsom? And I had no idea what they were talking about. So as the weeks went on from December through January, whether or not this is true, the rumors were topped by a story that there was originally going to be a Grateful Dead 60th anniversary event. I can't believe it's been 10 years since Fare Thee Well, just as an aside. But there was going to be a Grateful Dead 60 event at Folsom, but it was canceled because of the then recent death of Phil Lesh. And the promoters, this was all, since the rumors, there were no real details, quote, offered the July 4th weekend to Phish because Dicks was going to conduct renovations over the summer. So the second part about Dicks and renovations, that's irrelevant. And the first part turned out to be true. So I want to ask, what was your reaction to tour dates being announced with the band stating that Phish will take a break this year? That's their words, from their long-standing tradition of playing at Dicks. Were you disappointed? Are you thrilled? Somewhere in between? Or you're just happy they're still playing in Colorado in the summer?
I'm ecstatic. It's a dream for me, frankly, selfishly, come true in a lot of ways. Folsom is a 10-minute bike ride from my house, or a 30 to 40-minute walk. My first show was 10/30/91 at the Boulder Theater. I'm going to walk right by the Boulder Theater on my way to Folsom. Despite the rumors, there was a part of me that never imagined they'd play Folsom. Folsom has a lot of history for me just in my core, having gone to the university. I'm a huge CU Buffs football fan, was a season ticket holder for years. I go to multiple games a year. So just seeing my favorite band in the world play in a place that is so core to my life is really precious. My family's going to be here, my kids, my best friends in the world, we're all going to be here. Local friends who have never been to a show are going to tag along as well. It's going to be amazing. And, we actually have heard rumors of Folsom happening for several years. There's been talk of, hey, this is something that is out there. I remember having a conversation with one of my friends driving back from Dick's a couple of years ago, where we were talking about whether it was going to happen because he had heard some things. And so when the rumor kind of came out in December and it got legs, it felt legit right out of the gate. It's a small community here, right? We have friends who know things, right? You know how things work.
Sure.
And within a pretty short time period, we were probably 99% sure that it was going to go down. And frankly, in advance of the announcement, I think starting in January, we had friends who had booked flights, and our house was already full, right? So, as far as Dick's goes, I've never missed a Dick show. I'm 45 for 45. I think that's how many times the band's played there, dating back to the S show in 2011. Like the band, I freaking love Dick's. I love the lot. I love the ease of getting in and out. I love moving around the venue. I love the sound. I love the weather in September is perfect. And more often than not, the band plays great. They love it. They love to play there, right? So I'm going to miss Dick's a lot. But I think that the pros of Folsom, at least for me, outweigh the cons. And it's time to move on.
I'm curious about those pros and cons because when they announced this, I heard a lot of conflicting opinions, and they were nothing more than opinions. And I have a lot of contacts. I don't know. I wouldn't call them contacts. That makes me sound professional. I just mean Phish friends who I chat with every now and again, and a lot of them are in Denver, or at least in Colorado, I can say. And it was met with mixed reactions. Some people were thrilled because people have gotten shut out of Dick's. It's not a small venue, Dick's isn't, but it's garnered such a reputation and momentum over the years, over the past decade plus, that it automatically sells out, it seems. And now Folsom is what, twice that capacity or so?
It is. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the largest venue that the band has booked, right? In terms of set stadiums, right? I think the largest probably in advance of this would have been like one of the baseball stadiums, I guess.
Yeah, I would guess I don't know how big exactly what the capacity is for Wrigley Field or for Fenway Park. I guess it would have to maybe top out at maybe 30,000.
I think so.
Because those are those are the smallest baseball stadiums in the majors.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think that, as we've already seen, tickets for this will be available. I don't think that the venue will sell out. I would be shocked if it does. Dead and Co. did, I believe, when they played here in 2023. But you're also talking there, frankly, it's called what it is. That band's a bigger draw based on their history and everything that Phish is, right? Still. Yeah, I mean, I see the mixed reactions as it relates to Folsom versus Dick's, right? There's a large amount of the population that are fans of the band that live in Denver, right? So Dick's would certainly be a lot easier for them to get to. And but as far as actual availability of tickets goes, I think that that Folsom would be a significantly easier ticket.
Yeah, truly everybody gets in. If you were behind the scenes, and this is nothing more than a guess, Brian, do you think this is a 1-year anomaly and they'll go back to Dick's next?
No, I don't, man. I think you're going to book something like this for a longer contract. My gut says it's probably a couple, 3 years. There's a part of me, and I mean, I don't know anything. Maybe Dick's is done. I almost feel like, and it's funny, when the band walked off the stage in September of last year, after having encored it with Sabotage at the S show in 2011, we were joking. We were like, that's it. That's the bookend, right? Who knows, right? The area around Dick's has changed, right? It's much more residential than it ever was. There is a brand new professional women's soccer team that was just announced, who is building a soccer stadium adjacent to downtown Denver that opens in 2028. So just a gut feel. I'm calling 3 years at Folsom, and then they play the professional women's soccer stadium starting in 28.
Well, Folsom Field, as you mentioned earlier, it's on the campus of the University of Colorado at Boulder, which means this is the fourth venue in a row on this tour to either be located on a college campus or associated with a college. I would be really surprised if anyone doing this tour, or at least a big chunk of it, did not get to hear Alumni Blues. And I looked up its history. Folsom Field, I thought originally that it would be the oldest venue on the tour. Forest Hills beats it out just by 1 year, but Folsom Field was built, or at least opened, in 1924, and it's hosted several legendary musical acts. Younger fans may know it as a venue, as you mentioned, for Dead and Company. And I wanted to ask, 2023, when they sold it out, was that the one that was being advertised as their last tour?
Yes.
Right. So that may have had something to do with it too. But in addition to Dead and Co., some of its credits that people listening might be aware of, the Grateful Dead proper, not Dead and Company. They played their at least one show, September 3rd, 1972, which is released as Dick's Picks 36, amazing show. But also Buddy Guy, Steve Miller Band, Fleetwood Mac, Country Joe and the Fish, the Stones, the Eagles, the Who, Paul McCartney, Dave Matthews Band. Like, Folsom Field is not a stranger to huge concerts, even though it might be the first time that some of us are going for Phish, or any of us are going for Phish. But this is a true stadium as it relates to the phrase stadium tour. You know, like the Rolling Stones are capable of playing. Its stated capacity is 54,972, but with the field available, it goes to above 61,000. So what is it like seeing a stadium show, and how do you picture Phish kind of adapting to this?
I saw the Dave Matthews Band play there. Gosh, what was that, 23, 24 years ago? I've seen a handful of the Dead and Company shows that were at Folsom. I think it's really important to keep in mind the size of Folsom. You know, it's not this massive, Southeastern Conference 100,000 seat, University of Alabama stadium, right? It's or University of Texas. It's not this 100,000. It's a 54,000 seat stadium, which in terms of Division I football is actually small. You take into consideration the size of a football field compared to like a soccer field, like comparing the size of the field to Dick's, for example. This stadium is, I think the field of a football field is what, 2/3 the size of a soccer field, they call it, right? The thing that's really cool about Folsom too is that of all the college football stadiums, I want to say Folsom has the narrowest sidelines, or perhaps amongst the narrowest sidelines. So the lowest rows of seats are really right on the field, right? And there's probably between, the lowest seats rows go really small. So, if I look back and say, okay, I did a little research here. So Dead and Co., when they last played in July of 23, they, I believe, sold it out, and permitted capacity was 43,000 people. Last summer, Tyler Childers and Odessa played separate shows, not together. That'd be weird. They had 40,000 people. The vibe to me feels like, and this, I don't know, I feel like what it's probably going to feel like is, I think it's going to feel smaller than people think. That's my thought. Yeah.
I'm interested in that only because I tend to avoid stadium shows. I know when you mentioned Dave Matthews Band, I saw them probably on that same tour when they were playing Giant Stadium, right? They were at kind of the zenith of their popularity. And traditionally, stadium shows are not as much fun. But that said, public announcement system, PA system technology, and sound technology in general has improved so much in the last 30 and 40 years that a stadium show could still provide good sound, as opposed to when you and I were a lot younger, going to stadium shows meant you got to get all the way downstairs or else you're in the nosebleeds and it sounds like a fourth generation audience tape.
Amen. Amen. I haven't seen Phish in a lot of, say, basketball arenas, right? But I saw them in 2003 at the Pepsi Center in Denver. Horrible sound. I saw them in 2023 at the United Center in Chicago, a very similarly constructed building. Granted, indoors, sound was amazing, right? Dick's sound, with the relays, often where we sat, we used to be floor junkies, and then we moved up into the stands and we would sit at Dick's. We would always post up directly opposite the stage, so the sound was perfect back there with the relays. That's how I expect the sound at Folsom to be. The last Dead & Co show that I saw at Folsom 2 years ago, sound was great. Sound was great. To your point, I think the technology is there that you can make a really big run sound fantastic.
Well, I'm crossing my fingers. And just to put a bow on this part of the conversation, just to reference back to all of our Dick's fans, right? You and your Dick's Church. As I mentioned, I've heard a lot of people happy that Phish is playing Folsom and a lot of people unhappy about it. The people who are unhappy about it have used phrases like, or at least stereotypes like, it's a bitch to get to Folsom. Simple logistics like parking, going to the bathroom is, it's harder to get to the bathroom in Folsom than it is in Dick's. What's your impression in terms of logistics and I guess creature comforts is the best way I could think to put it at Folsom?
Certainly. Yeah, I get it. I mean, Dick's is a staple, right? It's church for a lot of people and it's easy to get to. We talked about how easy it was to get to from Denver, from the airport, all these kinds of things, right? The atmosphere being the wild, wild west, all the great things about it. I feel like in general, people resist change. And wow, we're talking about Phish fans here. So guess what? There's going to be beef about something, right?
When we were thinking about this, when we were talking about this, my first thought was, what if they announced somewhere else in the New York City area, except for Madison Square Garden for New Year's Eve? What a shit fit everyone would pitch.
Exactly. So, as far as logistics goes, between Boulder and Denver, there's a 3-lane highway, right? Highway 36 is a 3-lane highway. Between Golden, which is south of Boulder, and here, there's a highway. Between Longmont, which is northeast of here, there's a highway, right? So getting in and out of town is very manageable as far as that goes. I don't expect traffic to be that bad. It's going to be over the 4th of July weekend, right? I think that should be manageable, frankly. People don't want to drive. There's bus options. There's other transportation options. There's car services, all those kinds of things. And, I think in terms of Boulder, Boulder is used to handling really large events, right? Memorial Day weekend, every single year, 40,000+ people run the Boulder 10K race. We have to handle those kinds of people, right? Mass amounts of humanity. 7 Saturdays a year, campus hosts major college football games, right? There's places to park all around. There's neighborhoods all around town. There's on-campus parking. People are staying at a hotel. You're 20 minutes away from the stadium. Some are within a 10-minute walk. So, getting onto campus and getting off campus, I think is going to be relatively easy. Getting out of the show, that can be a hoopty a little bit. Yeah, maybe. Right. But it's not anything that any of us haven't had to deal with before. I mean, as far as inside the stadium goes, look, it's 100 years old, right? It just celebrated that anniversary last year. And while there have been several additions, obviously, throughout that time period, which includes amenities that have been upgraded, there also are some parts that are old. For example, one area of the stadium has brand new restrooms. And some of the tunnels going from the outer concourse into the stadium itself have the original bathrooms with troughs for bathrooms. Right? So, you kind of get everything. There's plenty of places to eat in the concourse. There's food trucks outside that'll be within the gates of the stadium, on the stadium proper, inside the field house, which is adjacent to the west of the stadium, where I saw the band in 1992. Horrible sound, speaking of that. There's food in there, right? Beer everywhere, I think. And then inside the stadium, get used to metal bleacher seats. Here's something that's different than Dick's that I recall from Dead & Co. There are bathrooms in porta potties on the floor.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So there's a creature comfort for you.
So let's zoom in on Boulder itself. This is obviously the first time Phish is playing Folsom Field, but it's not the first time they're playing in Boulder, and certainly, like I said, not the first time they're playing in Colorado, a state that, in my opinion, ranks right up there with Vermont and New York in terms of historical importance to the band and their mythology. So to date, according to Phish.net, Phish has played Boulder 10 times. They first played Boulder on April 4th and 5th, 1990, at a club called Quigley's Underground, which eventually closed in 1991, and then it became Club 156. I couldn't find any more information about it since then. And then they would return regularly in the 90s, the early 90s, both to Boulder and to Colorado. They would play venues like the Glenn Miller Ballroom. And you mentioned the Boulder Theater. They would outgrow the town as early as 1993. They last played Boulder at the, how do you pronounce it? Is it Balch Field House?
That's correct, Balch.
Okay. The Balch Field House, which opened in 1937, mostly for men's basketball, the college men's basketball team. And then by 94, the band had moved over to Red Rocks for their regular stints in Colorado outside of the Denver arenas. But it should be noted that since 93, all the band's solo efforts have stopped in Boulder many times. Like at a quick count, Phish.net has recorded 30 times that Phish band members have performed in Boulder in, their various configurations, like Mike Gordon and Leo Kottke, the Jazz Mandolin Project, Paige McConnell solo, Tab, and many more. What do you think the scene will be like at Folsom? Because it's obviously a very heavy concentration of Phish heads.
I've been lucky enough I saw the band twice as the band, like I said, here in town in 91 and 92. And then I've seen Tab and Trey. Trey's played on campus. I've seen Paige. I've seen Mike here a couple of times at the Boulder Theater. As far as the band and playing on campus and what that is going to be like, college is not going to be in session, so I don't expect a ton of students. But I think we'll probably end up having a younger crowd than perhaps we see at Dick's. This is a destination, kind of a destination event in a way akin to Dick's, I feel like. So
yeah, it's a destination for me.
Yeah, right. So you're going to have probably a similar scene with one notable exception. Don't expect a shakedown to be on campus. I'm sure that there will be a no vending policy that's enforced. So it's going to be very unlike Dick's Wild Wild West from what people have come to expect there, right? I do think, though, that the city is going to allow vending, or at least I would expect that they may allow vending to be held. There's a grass field that's adjacent to Boulder High School, which is kind of smack dab in the middle of between the stadium and Pearl Street downtown. And it's immediately downhill and across Boulder Creek from Folsom Field, which is, and so it's about a 10-minute walk to the stadium. So that's where Dead and Company vendors set up. And I would expect that perhaps the same thing would happen for the Phish shows.
What is the area around Folsom Field like around campus? Restaurants, food, drink, any recommendations you would make for places for people to go, or at least types of food to sample?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, there's going to be food and drink inside the stadium, obviously. So directly west of Folsom, on the other side of Broadway, about a 10-minute walk from campus is the Hill District. That's where most of the college students live. There you're going to find coffee shops, bars, restaurants. The famous restaurant called The Sink is there. It's a CU and Boulder landmark that serves beer, burgers, pizza. That would be a great place to go before the shows. Also up on the hill, there's Illegal Pete's Burritos. There's a Fat Shack up there for late night eats. I think they're open till like 3 a.m. or at least they are when school's in session. The Fox Theater is up on the hill. That's where, just heads up, Taper's Choice is playing. Folsom, Night Zero on the 2nd of July. The Flying Mojito Brothers are playing an after show on the 3rd. And also up there, like I said, at the Fox Theater is where Fan Art is going to be setting up shop. I think it's on the 4th and the 5th. So that's the hill, and then downtown, like the Pearl Street area, Boulder's not really known for like a specific taste, I wouldn't say. There's a lot of great restaurants downtown, 15, 20-minute walk from campus, right? So you're talking like beer and pub food. There's West End Tavern, there's Mountain Sun, there's Bohemian Beer Garden. There's, if you're talking sushi, there's Hapa, Japango, Zanmai. We got a couple of really good food halls where you're kind of like, indoor food trucks where you can get a variety of different things. Avanti and Rosetta Hall are both great, and they're on like the third and fourth story top of those buildings. So you have amazing views of the mountains from up there. I'd say, if you're looking for a killer view with decent Mexican food, but killer margaritas, Rio Grande is awesome. A bunch of upscale dining as well. I mean, let's see what comes to mind. Oak, Brasserie 1010, Black Cat, Frosca. North of town, up in my hood, part of the neighborhood is a great Southwestern restaurant called Santo. Audrey Jane Pizza's up here. And then there's also an awesome coffee shop up in my neighborhood called Beliza. And I mentioned that because that's owned and run by some fans.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. One last thing, I think, what you would think of around Colorado is also beer. There's a bunch of craft breweries, upslopes in town, Twisted Pine, Four Noses are inside the city limits. And then just outside of town are Asher, Avery, and Beyond the Mountain. And then if you wanted to hang up in Longmont, which is about 15 minutes up the road, Left Hand's up there, Bootstraps up there, and Witty's up there too. So yeah, you got a lot of stuff to choose from.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for giving us the inside scoop on Boulder, both as a citizen, as a fan, inside out. I feel like I'm ready to go tomorrow. I could if I needed to. Really appreciate you taking the time and also just the wherewithal to share your history at Folsom Field and about the town in general. So much appreciated. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate you having me on.
That's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Brian from Boulder for joining me today, Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode, Phish.net for all the facts we had to dig up to get everything right, and the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to support children's music education in schools. Next week, we'll be heading over to Columbus for the Schottenstein Center to see what goes on in the middle of Ohio. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the podcast by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. You can also support Attendance Bias by following us on social media. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time in Columbus on Attendance Bias.